Okay, hello everyone. This is Rig, and today we are starting live classes. So, I have not done this before. If there is any problem regarding anything, please bear with it and forgive me for my mistakes. So, we have always wanted to do an interactive session with our students, and that is the reason I am starting this live class. If you have seen my past videos, I am going according to the ICSE syllabus of class 6. However, these videos are in very much detail, so anyone from any other boards, if you want to know about the Egyptian civilization, you can obviously go through these videos. And this is the second part of my video in Egyptian civilization. I have done many videos before this on Mesopotamian civilization. Also, this is the second part on Egyptian civilization. So, if you have any doubt, you can ask me in comments. And after watching this video, try to watch the videos before this. You will find it in the YouTube playlist of class 6. Hence, please follow so that you can get expertise knowledge on the Egyptian civilization. Today, our focus will be on the achievements of Egyptian civilization or the achievements of Egyptians. Now, this is one of the earliest civilization of human history. We have had the Mesopotamian civilization and next comes the Egyptian civilization. About the timeline and characteristics of the Egyptian civilization, I have already discussed before in my last video. So yes, Sadman, this is on the Egyptian civilization, so please follow if you are interested, and you can also ask me doubts if you want. So, beginning with the achievements of Egyptian civilization, the characteristics I have already discussed before. So, beginning with writing, the Egyptians were very much expert in writing. They were the ones who were second in human history to discover or to make the process of writing as a form of expression. They invented the process of writing as a form of expression only after the Sumerians. So, how were their writings? This script is known as the hieroglyphic script. The Egyptians developed a form of writing called hieroglyphic. So their form of writing is hieroglyphic writing and their script is called the hieroglyphic script. So this was the typical feature of Egyptian civilization. The Sumerians or the Mesopotamians had cuneiform script, whereas the Egyptians had hieroglyphic script. In Greek, hieroglyphic means sacred carvings. So in Greek, this term hieroglyphic is in Greek language. So according to Greek language, hieroglyphic means sacred carvings. Means writings were engraved on stones or on clay. And since writings were mostly based on the writings of gods, that is why it is called sacred carving, something related to religion or holiness. That is why they are called sacred. Initial writing style. How were their initial writing styles? Initially, the Egyptians used a picture-based script. So how is a picture-based script? In the left-hand side, there is a picture. Here you can see that there is a picture of a bird and there is a picture of other animals also and different kind of instruments. There is a picture of swan here. So these are writings based on pictures, and these writings based on pictures are called pictographic scripts. So initial writing style was pictographic. So their alphabets were designed based on different kinds of pictures. They later developed a simplified alphabet. So later on, they developed a simplified form. The pictures became alphabet. This alphabet had 24 consonants and no vowels. So in the English alphabet, you can see that there are 26 letters, but in the Egyptian alphabet there were 24 letters. All were consonants. You have vowels in English alphabet like A, E, I, O, U, but in Egyptian style of writing all were consonants. The script was written from right to left. This is one of the typical feature of Egyptian civilization where the script is written from right to left. So hieroglyphic script and cuneiform script of the Mesopotamians both are written from right to left, not like the typical Indian scripts which are from left to right. Egyptians initially wrote on stone walls and clay tablets. So initially at the beginning part of their writings were mainly engraved on stone walls and on clay tablets. Weight clay platforms were there, just like you have slates. I think many of you have seen slates. So slates, imagine a slate made out of clay. There, when the clay will be wet, every person will write something, and then when the clay will dry up, that time the writings will become permanent. So writing surfaces were mainly on stone walls and clay tablets. Use of papyrus. Later they used papyrus, a paper made from water reed. So water reed was used to make a kind of paper called papyrus. So this was how they wrote. And how the ink was made? Ink was made from soot, gum, and water. So soot means a powdery substance which is made from carbon particles, half burnt particles, like half burnt wood. When it becomes black, they give a powdery substance. So those powdery substances are mixed with gum, and so you get a kind of an ink called soot, and those were used for writing. And where were they written? Writings were found on pyramids and tomb walls. Tombs are mausoleums where dead people are kept. So pyramids and tomb walls were the places where mainly writings were there for the Egyptians. Science. How did they evolve in scientific practices? So, scientific progress. The Egyptians made remarkable advances in science. They made a lot of advancements in science. They had a very much scientific mentality. They studied mathematics, astrology, chemistry, and biology. So, what did they study? They study almost every kind of scientific subjects, that is mathematics. They were also good in astrology. They knew and had a lot of expertise in chemistry and biology also. The design of pyramids shows knowledge of geometry. So from the construction of the pyramids, we can understand how much experts they were in measurements and angles. So from the designs of pyramids, they we get to understand that they had great depth and knowledge on geometry. They were aware of mathematical calculations and algebra. So they also knew basic mathematical calculations. Not only basic, they were experts in mathematical calculations, and also they had idea about algebra. So you are in class 6 right now. You already know how algebra happens. So they had basic knowledge on algebra too. They embalmed dead bodies to preserve them as mummies. So they covered the dead bodies and preserved them as mummies. Mummies means so that dead bodies can be preserved properly and they would be kept there for thousands of years. They knew how to preserve the dead bodies. This process proves their understanding in biology. So before preserving the dead bodies, they will have to process the body in such a way that it remains untainted for thousands of years. So this is not possible without proper understanding of biology. It also indicates their grasp in chemistry. So from this we can also understand how much experts they were in chemistry. Their science had practical uses in life and death. So they used these scientific techniques both in their present life and also in their funerary practices or after death. Solar calendar. How was the solar calendar of the Egyptians? How did they measure time? So the Egyptians were first to use a solar calendar. Egyptians were first to use solar calendar. Solar calendar means measuring times based on the movements of sun. If you remember about the calendar of Mesopotamians, they measured time based on the movements of moon. That is called lunar calendar. So Egyptians were first to use solar calendar. It was based on two annual floods in the river Nile. So this calendar was based on two kinds of floods, or sorry, on a flood which happened in river Nile. So every year flood happened in, or the Nile overflowed in a certain period of time in a year. So they calculated the days when the Nile river water flowed, and so they based on their calendar on when the Nile river water flowed or floods on river Nile. They measured the duration between two floods, and that was considered to be 1 year. So the calendar had 365 days in a year. Just like us, they also made a calendar which had 365 days. The year was divided into 12 months. Now these 365 days was divided into 12 months. Each month had 30 days. So now your counting must be 12 into 30. It will be 360. So where from did the 5 other days come? The remaining 5 days were for religious celebrations. So they kept 5 days especially for the religious celebrations. It helped in planning seasonal and religious activities. So thus they got ideas of how to plan the seasonal and religious activities. Seasonal activities are mainly agricultural activities. So agricultural, when to sow seeds, when to harvest seeds, or when to harvest crops, all these things were based on seasonal calculations. This calendar was notable Egyptian contribution. So this was one of the greatest contribution of the Egyptian, that is making of the solar calendar. Astronomy. How experts were they in calculating the movements of celestial bodies? So Egyptians invented instruments to observe the skies. Egyptians had a lot of scientific instruments through which they could observe the movements of celestial bodies. They studied the movements of stars and planets. So they studied how the stars and planets move in the sky. They had deep understanding of astronomical phenomena. So they had great understanding of the solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, and how the earth moves around the sun, what are the other planets, how the moon moves around the earth. All these things they knew already. They created an astronomical chart. Astronomical charts help you to calculate or to predict the movements of celestial bodies. These tools showed their observation accuracy. So with the help of all these tools, they could accurately observe the celestial activities. It helped with religious and agricultural planning. So with all these things, they could plan the religious functions, when to make or when to organize the religious functions, and also when to do the agricultural activities. Egyptian astronomy influenced future civilizations. So other civilizations, they understood the astronomical aspects of the Egyptians and they could make innovations in their own way. Pyramids and Sphinx. So what is pyramids and what is Sphinx? Pyramids and sphinxes, a remarkable legacy of the Egypt. Here you can see both in one picture in the left hand side. The lion, the human-headed lion is the sphinx, and the structure behind it is the pyramid. So pyramids and sphinxes are remarkable legacy of Egypt. Pyramid building started with step pyramid of Djoser. So every pyramid constructions owe their creation to the step pyramid of Djoser. This is pronounced as Djoser. It was designed by Imhotep. So the first pyramid was designed by a person named Imhotep, and this person Imhotep was very much advanced in scientific mentality. So he designed the pyramid of Djoser. Yes, someone has asked me this question: what type of religious function? Religious functions were there mainly based on agriculture, and they also worshipped the sun god Ra, god of death, and Anubis, Osiris, all these were different gods in Egyptian mythology. If you watch my last videos, I have deeply discussed about the religion of the Egyptians. So please go through that in order to understand the religious functions. The tomb was made entirely of stone. So the first pyramid in Djoser was made entirely of stones. Four large steps were formed on each side of the building. So each side, there were four sides and four large steps were formed on those four sides. This design gave the pyramid a pyramidical shape. So from the design of pyramid in Djoser, we get a pyramidical shape. The most famous pyramid is at Giza near Cairo. This illustration on the left hand side is the picture of pyramid of Giza, and today it is on very near to the capital of Egypt, that is Cairo. Sphinxes were large statues showing sculpting skills. So sphinxes are large statues and that shows the sculpting expertise of the Egyptians. The Great Sphinx of Giza is 73.5 meter long, 6 meter wide, and 20 meter high. So this is the greatest Sphinx. However, there were many other Sphinx also. In a place called Luxor, there is Karnak Temple. There is a series of Sphinx, and approximately it is assumed that over 1,300 Sphinx were there in uh, in this place. So Sphinx, even though the Sphinx of Giza, one Sphinx in Giza is the largest and it is most famous, but there are many other Sphinx throughout the Egyptian civilization. So what is the material used in Sphinx? Each Sphinx was carved out of a single solid stone. So one stone was used to make one Sphinx. So each Sphinx was made using each stone. End of Egyptian civilization. How did the Egyptian civilization decline, or how did it end? Long duration. The Egyptian civilization lasted for a very long time. Over 5,000 years was the duration of Egyptian civilization. So it is one of the longest lasting ancient civilizations. It lasted more than any of the other four ancient civilizations, that is Mesopotamia, Indus, Chinese. Egyptian lasted the most. Invasion by Alexander. Alexander invaded this Egyptian civilization in around 330s BC. So Alexander invaded around those time in second century BC, and so That was almost the end of political supremacy of the Egyptians. Internal revolts weakened the civilization. So internal revolts were there, and that weakened the civilization from within. The people from inside the Egyptian civilization protested against governance, and so the internal system collapsed. Foreign invasions also caused destruction. So Egyptians were very much frequently attacked by other civilizations like the Greeks and the Mesopotamians. Before that, the Babylonians also attacked Egyptians in many cases. So foreign threats were also there for the Egyptians. These invasions led to the end of Egyptian civilization. Despite the decline, their legacies survived. So even though the civilization declined, their legacy and their contributions to human history cannot be ignored. Pyramids and mummies still amaze the world. So pyramids and mummies are very much attractive to anyone interested in history. So pyramids and mummies still amaze the world even today. Egypt remains one of the oldest civilizations of the world. So that is how Egypt is significant. I plan to make separate videos on topics like Cleopatra, pyramids, mummies, Sphinx. So these are interesting topics which requires further discussions. I plan to make them in near future. So please support me so that I gain motivation to make them in later coming videos. Okay. So now we will go through the questions and answers which will help you to understand this chapter better. Write a short note on hieroglyphics. The Egyptians developed a form of writing called the hieroglyphic. In Greek, the word meant sacred carvings. Initially, the Egyptians used picture-based script. Later on, they also developed a simplified alphabet which had 24 consonants and no vowels. The script was written from right to left. Egyptian writings can be found on stone walls, clay tablets, and papyrus. What are pyramids? Pyramids are gigantic monuments built for the burial of pharaohs. The practice of building pyramids commenced with the step pyramid of Djoser designed by Imhotep. This tomb was made entirely with stones which were skillfully placed in such a manner that large pyramids were formed on each of the four sides of the building. This gave the tomb a pyramidal shape. What is the solar calendar by the Egyptians? The Egyptians were the first to introduce a solar calendar. They calculated the timing of the two annual floods in the river Nile and came up with a solar calendar that had 365 days. This calendar showed a year with 12 months, each having 30 days. The remaining 5 days were meant for religious celebrations. Discuss the signs of Egyptian civilization. The Egyptians made remarkable advances in subjects like mathematics, astrology, chemistry, and biology. The architectural design of the pyramids indicates that they had deep knowledge of geometry. They were aware of the mathematical calculations and algebra. Their practice of embalming the dead body for preservation as a mummy proves that they had thorough knowledge of biology and chemistry. Write a short note on astronomy of Egypt. The Egyptians were the first to invent an instrument to observe the movement of stars and planets. The Egyptians knew about stars and planets. They prepared an astronomical chart. Their observations helped them in religious and agricultural planning. This shows their deep understanding of astronomy and celestial events. So that was all about the achievements of the Egyptian civilization. Hope you have liked the video. This was my first live. From next on, I expect more cooperation from you people. You can ask me doubts. I will try to answer them. And this video will be available in my YouTube channel. So anytime if you want to view this, you can go through it. And also at the time of question answers, you can pause it and note down in your copies. So thank you very much for your love and support.